Hello, everyone. We wanted to thank you for attending. This is Roxanne and Jacques here.
Yes.
Welcome, everyone. As stated earlier, if you have any questions during that seminar that you want to ask to Jack and Roxanne, please pass them on to me by private message and I'll forward them. And Roxanne, please check your chat tabs at the bottom. I already sent you the first questions.
Okay, I've got them. Thanks. I'd like to know if either Jacques or Roxanne support the Green parties around the world.
I cannot. I have to know exactly what their proposals are. The word Green Party doesn't give me specific detail so that I can examine it. So I can't say that.
Usually what they're proposing is more pertinent, but they don't have any overall plan of how to organize society or run it more efficiently. And I've never heard them mention anything against the monetary system, although I may be wrong. I haven't looked into a lot of their proposals. Some of the Green Party people in Latin America, anyway, were running and supporting the Venus Project. There was this one woman who did it recently, but she didn't get very far with it. But it was in Colombia. But that was through the Green Party. Okay, how does Jacques feel about family names? As in the Netherlands, it's mostly connected with occupation title, like the example, Kenny the Baker. How does he see this change within a resource-based economy?
In a resource-based economy, there will be a symbol alongside of all names, which give you an overview of their general values and exactly what they do in their occupation. So when you meet a person in the future, the code name will tell you what their area of interest is, what their training is, what their competency is, so you'll know exactly what they're like in terms of their function. The name itself, like my name, Jacques Fresco, Jacque, doesn't tell you anything. All those letters don't stand for anything in particular. So I think that names in the future, when you get the name of a person in the future, you'll know their interest is sociology, anthropology, geology, all the areas they're interested in. Their name will tell you what their function is, rather than Euripides Sneed, which doesn't tell you a damn thing.
Okay, the Senate last night, I guess this is a headline in a website or a newspaper here. It's a quote. The Senate last night codified into law the power of the U.S. military to identify, let me see, detain them. Okay. Oh, okay, they're talking about that the U.S. military could put the United States citizens with no trial or no oversight into jail. And they've done this in other countries. Do you think this will be used against the Occupy movement? As far as I know, they brought this up, but I heard that President Obama was going to not to pass that. He was going to veto that, but we don't really know if he's going to or not. Do you think that would be used against the Occupy movement?
Yes, I do. I think they'll use whatever force they can to discredit anything that they feel is a threat to their established system.
Yeah, I'd be really curious to see if he does do that. It would be pretty horrifying.
I can't deal with that.
Is an alternative known to eliminate language interpretations? I'm not quite sure what.
Yes, in the manufacture of products or automobiles or airplanes or trains, there is a blueprint, and the blueprint gives the specifications of the metals used, the alloys used, the compression strength, torsional strength. When you have a blueprint to a product, that is fully comprehensive. When you talk about the green movement, unless you spell out every bit of information related to it, it's difficult to evaluate. When you call something by a name, a sane society, well, what is that comprised of? What do you mean by sane? How are decisions arrived at? Who makes the decisions? What if two people have a great idea? How do you select one from the other? In other words, it has to be a very specific question in order to get a specific answer, not a general answer, like what do you think of this or that. Without specific details, I really can't answer that.
Somebody's asking, who are we considering for a scriptwriter for the motion picture? We are working with many different people. Yeah, we have met with many different people. The first requirement is they come out here, attend one of the tours, so they have a foundation of this direction, and they meet with us on Sundays if they're interested, and then write something, and we see if it's compatible at all. We've done this with many, many people. We're in the midst of doing it with 3 people now. So far, we have not found anybody who we feel can handle it, but this is the most important thing right now, is to get the scriptwriter, and we are working on it. We're writing to different agents with scriptwriters who we think might be interested. Even when we know they ask for millions of dollars, we're just trying to get it in front of them to see if they're even interested, and they might even take it on for a lot less, certain scriptwriters who we thought might be viable. We talked to one who did The Matrix the other day, but this person is working on a Matrix 4, but it wasn't a good match. She was very metaphysical, but we're working with perhaps an associate of hers. So we're really trying. We're working on this very diligently. It's very important to us. But so far we haven't found anybody, but we will. What are your plans for the transition for the economic system towards a resource-based economy?
I don't make any plans unless I know who's involved. The plans would depend on how many people or whether a particular government is interested in sponsoring the first experimental city. I can't answer that. I don't have that information.
We have no control. We have no funds. If we did, you'd see plans. We do have a lot of plans in terms of what it would look like physically that Jacques been working on for over 75 years, but how things will break down, who will call upon us for different things, we don't have that control. The most we can do right now is try and get this information out there as accurately as possible so it's not misinterpreted, and have people know about this and try and get the information out there. That's the best we can do at this time, any way that we can. This is interesting. Lots of hours of filming were done during the film Future by Design. Most of it stripped away and omitted. This is true. I think we have over 60, 70 hours. In fact, William Gazecki was really, really kind to give us the footage. I have gone through it and divided it into different categories. Right now, I am using a lot of that. I'm doing a film or a documentary in terms of what is the Venus Project. And I am using a lot of that footage that hasn't been out, most of it, within this. I hope to have it finished enough within about a month to be able to get it to somebody who wants to put music on it. I'm going to be looking for that. And we'll be giving it away for free so the activists can give it away. So I was thinking also to do another DVD or another section of more of that footage that I don't use, the other footage that I don't use in this from the Gazecki film as well. I don't see any other questions in here right now, so if we could...
On the way.
Okay, thanks, Ben. Is there anyone who would like to ask something, or if there's something that wasn't answered thoroughly enough, if you want to come back and do a follow-up question?
Well, no one's complaining about your answers yet.
Okay, great, thanks. Anybody have a... Oh, and here's another one. With the world already having passed peak oil, how will that affect the construction of the Venus Project without the use of oil?
We don't depend on oil. We depend on electrical generators. We depend on geothermal, wave power. I think I've mentioned this before. We depend on existing alternatives such as natural heat of the earth, heat concentrators, tidal motion, underwater rivers and streams to harness the Gulf Stream, the Japanese current, the Icelandic current, and all the other flows in the ocean which we can harness. I cannot tell you specifically until I know what a country has put up. If a country says, we'll put up the funding to harness the power of the Gulf Stream, then I can tell you. Until that information is forthcoming, I cannot tell you.
There's a question in addition to that question, because that individual thinks it's not properly answered. How do we make things if we don't depend on oil, since most things are made from oil, like plastics and chemicals?
We assign different research labs to work out other problems, other methods of making a synthetic material that will cover the same function. Those are the assignments given to labs. Just as today, we give labs assignments. We give industry assignments. We tell them we want an airplane that can travel 2,000 miles an hour to be able to turn within 500 feet. In other words, all those assignments or specifications are given to the research lab, and then they go to work on it. But it's not one lab, it's many labs that work on different problems. The minute they come up with a solution, we then give them the next assignment. The assignments deal with the controls that are not easily duplicated. We assign them material needs, we assign them information if they need it. There are many different types of materials being developed. We also make that information available to the labs that are working on the problem.
Where was it during the war we blocked what country? That's a good example.
We prevented Germany from getting synthetic rubber from Sumatra, rather from getting rubber from Sumatra. But the Germans, having many staffs of technicians, developed a synthetic rubber. So they went right ahead making tires for their airplanes and jeeps because they had enough technology to be able to innovate, make materials that compensate for those materials not available.
It was World War II, was that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
World War II. If you have a competent staff, I see no doubt, no problems in developing alternative materials for those we don't have an abundance of.
This person is asking for more details about the film. Is it just 100% focus on how life will be in the future? No, and they're asking if there's a background telling Jacques' story. Some of that will be intertwined, not as Jacques as the character, but so the information is within there. It'll take place in many different times, periods of time in history, and it'll have flashbacks.
We will try to give people an account of the factors that shape the value systems that I use. The reason for selecting certain shapes of cities, the reason for selecting transportation of a given kind, all of that will be depicted in the film, showing the reasons and how one arrives at a decision. We don't make decisions in the Venus Project. We arrive at them. If you don't know what that means, you have to measure the wave power before you can anticipate the energy that can be generated. You have to identify all fumaroles under the ocean so that the cities at sea can tap those fumaroles and tap that energy for operating the cities in the sea. But we can't do that until we do an overall survey. I hope that clarifies it. If not, you'll have to ask more details on the questions.
Okay, next question. Should we just email, call companies, broadcast companies, industries, school boards, etc., and talk about the Venus Project? Or should we wait for particular materials from the media contact team and prepare presentations for formal events that are planned ahead of time? The former seems doable by anyone, the latter not. I would say yes, reach out to as many companies, broadcast companies, everything that you can. I would coordinate it perhaps, maybe just send a list to the media team, so we know who's been contacted and how, and what materials you might have shown or what letters you might have written, so we can see what works. We can keep a record of what works and what doesn't work for certain organizations. This should all be kept in one place with the media contacts. So work with them as much as possible. We also have brochures, we have press kits on our website that we put up for this reason, so you'll have some information that you can send out to people and see if that works. If not, we'll work up something else. So do it in conjunction with the media the media team, and keep them aware of what you're doing, so we know, as I said, what works and what doesn't, and then we can alter it from there.
May I just add to this? There's also a daily event on our activism site, which is tvpactivism.com. And if you join the media contacts group on that site, if you add the coordinators of that group to your friends list on that site, you will be added to the daily events, and they are sent on a daily basis. And there you ask to contact certain media companies or TV stations, radio stations, to actually give the Venus Project a chance for an interview or a presentation on any of their shows. Thanks,
Sven. This is a community in Canada. I don't know how they pronounce this. Tawapaskat. It sounds like an Indian name, where the people are living in very substandard conditions. What do you think about situations such as these, finding a funding source and using the situation to supply housing and a potential for the Venus Project-like economy as an illustration to how things could be?
I don't think there's any way of doing that without the planners coming out here, learning in detail what has to be done. It has to be in accordance with the Venus Project proposals. If people go off in their own directions in attempting to find solutions, I think that would be the wrong way or the difficult way.
I think this question, though, is stating, why don't we use this poor community as a situation for the Venus Project, find funding for the Venus Project to house these people?
That would not solve the problem. You have to work out the energy determinants first, the electrification of a city. The city has to be designed to employ people and use them. You just don't build cities and fill it up with people. You have to work out all those details, and I can't deal with a feeding and clothing people without the overview included. The overview means how you deliver food, what the schools are like, how you propose social change, how you enact social change. All those details have to be answered in full. If you don't, you're going to have problems proportionate to that which you don't take into account.
Okay, is it possible for today's advances in hydroponics to provide everyone with food?
We just don't use hydroponics alone. That's just one aspect of feeding people. But the Japanese developed a system of running cables or strands of material into the ocean and putting crustaceans on those strands. And that way you can get more tissue, more living tissue in less area. And there are hundreds of other possibilities of growing edible plants in the sea. We don't just use hydroponics. We use whatever means, including air plants and hydroponics and soil.
I didn't read the whole question, but do you think it's possible advances in hydroponics for everyone? Okay, if everyone would take some effort to build a farm on their own, or a group, or even an urban environment to feed everybody, didn't they do that initiative during the World War II, Victory Gardens, in order to feed people?
I think that victory gardens are not the answer. What you need is mass agriculture. If you're going to feed millions of people, you can't do it with victory gardens. However, if you want to grow your own garden on your rooftop or backyard, that's all right too. But the real answer is not in victory gardens.
I'm not exactly sure what this person was talking about, but he says 2 weeks ago he asked about mechanical mind, but I don't understand the answer. I understood that feeling of self-awareness is illusion, but when you say that humans cannot think or reason, but in the same time our mind is mechanical, I see that as a contradiction. Can you explain what you mean by they can't think or reason?
I mean that an Eskimo cannot picture valves in a Volkswagen. I think that an Eskimo cannot picture aircraft if they've never seen any. People brought up in a given culture, like the Aztecs or American Indians, the various Indian tribes, cannot imagine things outside of their frame of reference. That's what I mean. I mean that an Indian, an American Indian, brought up on a reservation, cannot imagine electronic circuitry or how it works. That's what I mean by cannot think or reason outside of their environment. That a primitive airplane designer cannot envision cyclic pitch control on a helicopter. They have no idea of it or how it works. That's what I mean by man cannot think outside of the box that they're brought up in. Although some people feel they're doing that, there's no evidence to support that. No British child was ever born speaking English. No German child was ever born speaking German or Chinese. They have to go to school. They have to learn every word they utter. They do not inherit language. No matter how many generations have been speaking Chinese, a Chinese baby is never born speaking Chinese. That's what I mean. You're always within the confines of your environment. If you don't understand that, fish cannot imagine a world free of water.
Can you describe what you mean by the mind is mechanical?
It's based on association. If you see something that looks like an apple on a tree and you eat it, and it's very bitter and not pleasant at all to taste, you tend to refrain from eating that kind of food. That's what we call experience. You need experience. And that's why I say at many of my sessions, no human being ever makes a mistake. I know that's very hard to imagine. How would you know in the beginning just how large to make airplane wings? You make them too small, it doesn't get off the ground. You make them too large, they tend to flip up, so you have to brace them. In other words, everybody encounters things through experience. It's only experience that gives you the tools to overcome the problems that you have faced. If you still don't understand that, a guy named Steinmetz once determined the distance that wires have to be maintained separate so that their electrical fields do not interfere with one another or that the friction is decreased. You can't do that until you build an experiment and try to determine how far apart the wires should be for minimum interference. There's no way. That's what I mean by people never make a mistake. If you make wheels too small on an automobile, they can't climb a hill. In other words, there are many things that people do. Perhaps the first man that fooled with nitric acid and glycerin had the building blown apart, including his own life was destroyed. And it was his brother-in-law that said, never fool with those materials. There's no way to tell. When I say people can't make mistakes, they work within the box that they've been raised in.
You don't get your knowledge from any divine intervention or previous lives that you went through. You have to experience and reflect the environment around you.
And that's what I mean by man cannot think or reason. meaning outside of the environment they're raised in. They cannot think of things like that. Now, men in the past did think of sailboats. When you stand up in a boat and the wind is blowing, you, as an obstacle, offer resistance to the wind, and that moves the boat. If you open your coat or your jacket, you harness more of the wind. And eventually men made sails. But the men that made sails never dreamt of a propeller under the sea propelling the boat forward, unless they encounter a leaf falling from a tree spinning, unless they encounter the angular pitch of an oar moving a boat forward, unless they have the associative memory or experience showing other ways of moving a boat forward. They cannot think about it unless they have been exposed to something in nature that symbolizes mechanical movement. For example, a man had a shirt that was damp. He put it in the fireplace to dry it sooner, but the shirt went up the stack of the fireplace, and that's where the hot air balloon came from. It came from an event that occurred that was unusual. A woman boiling water with a cover over the pot. The cover lifted up above the pot with the steam pressure. That's where they got the idea for the piston engine, or expanding gases, moving objects. You have to have an experience in order to go forth. Some people used to beat their kids with a strap to try to get them to obey them. They found out later that it's much easier to work out a linguistic pattern of instruction or symbols, or show them a working model. In turn, gives them the answers to any problem. Beating them with a strap only causes them to behave a certain way when you're around. It does not modify their behavior. They behave as they will when you're not around. So the strap system is an old system that never really worked that well.
People have problems thinking what would happen with society in a Venus society with crime or rape or
I don't
killing
know what
somebody.
your question is, sir.
What happens in the Venus Project if there's any rape or somebody hurts somebody or somebody kills somebody?
Nobody goes to prison. They're helped out of that. I believe that all human behavior, all aspects of it, are shaped by the culture they live in or genetics. In other words, if there's something wrong with the brain, they should not be killed or put in prison. They should be helped. And if they were conditioned to hate Filipinos or Greeks or Jews or Swedes or blacks, they can be conditioned differently. I don't blame a person for the fact that they were acted upon by their culture to become a criminal. That all human action patterns, your dancing, humming music, all the customs that you have are learned by your society. And if society impinges information, if you're brought up in the Deep South, you're going to speak with a Southern accent. And you're not to be blamed for speaking with a Southern accent. It's part of your heritage or your environmental heritage. So I would say that all patterns of behavior are shaped by environment. Therefore, people are not to blame. If you're brought up in Nazi Germany, the kind of propaganda you're given, or if you're brought up in the Deep South, the kind of propaganda you're given about Afro-Americans is part of the social indoctrination of that environment. Therefore, people are not responsible for their behavior if they're brought up to behave that way. If you still don't understand that, people up the Amazon River build rafts the way they did 1,000 years ago, because there's never been any interference or information showing them a new way to do things.
How about those that stand for the Venus Project to start living together to support each other and think of ways to sustain just themselves as a group and pass their findings on to others?
I'd rather that you talk to people about the Venus Project and get them interested in supporting that type of social structure. I don't think you can live to yourself or try to help one another on the side. You have to convince as many people as you're able to as to the validity of the Venus Project's social proposals.
I don't know how we do that logistically either. I know we have 4 people living here, the zoning board. There's all sorts of restrictions for the number of housing you can have here. And then there has to be funding if anybody gets hurt. We have to have enough funding to take care of people too. It's very difficult within the monetary system in the United States where there's no medical care, just all sorts of obstacles for this. So it's very hard. And I've always thought that if we were going to start another community and do it like a hand tool community like we did this, it takes so long to do it that way without any funding that we'd be going backwards, where now we can start doing materials and getting information out there and having people come here and do seminars. That I'd rather see something started where we can do a bigger community if we had funding to get off the ground and do it very quickly. I mean, if there was enough people that wanted to get together who had funding who could do something, so we don't have to toil to make it and it takes 30, 40 years to make something like it did here, then it just takes too long. We did it really with not much funding and having to work on the side. And Jacques and Roxanne heard about the Sustainable City Masdar near Abu Dhabi. It's under construction. We've seen that briefly. It's kind of really chaotic. There's no overall planning. They might have some more sustainable ideas in there here and there, but I don't see any overall planning. Do you remember that specifically? We had somebody come to us at one time who wanted Jacques to design one little section in it, but it didn't go anywhere.
No, that wouldn't work. It has to be an overall design which includes all the nations of the world. You have to take away, I said this many times, all the artificial boundaries that separate people, share the Earth's resources, share inventions and ideas, and educate all people that want to go to school without a price tag. If you fail to do that, you will fail to achieve social and dynamic equilibrium.
Yeah, the question goes on to say it is planned for the elite, just a few people, this city. That's true. It doesn't even deal with the problems. Even if you put up a few green buildings, as they say today, that doesn't even touch the system. Or a better way to grow food, it doesn't touch our problems. As activists and coordinators, besides informing the Venus Project on our websites and social media, what can we do to accelerate the collapse of the monetary system?
You don't want to do that. The collapse of the system is what brings on another system. In other words, unfortunately, people do not act until they lose their home, lose their job, can't find another job, and are not supported by the government. They will react to that. And that is what you require. In other words, I'm not advocating that people suffer, but they don't seem to change things until they lose their jobs, their homes, and cannot get another job. When that happens, they seek social change.
There's really not much you need to do. This thing is collapsing rapidly. If you, right, all over the world, as Jacques is saying, if you go out and try and break into a bank or, throw Molotov cocktail into a bank or tear gas or something like that, they've been at it for a long time. You'll get arrested. And to have knowledgeable activists in jail is not optimal situation. We really need you out there talking to people, learning about this direction, getting as many people interested in this as possible, being able to start a city or help with something significant. What about portable water? How would portable water be available to everyone?
I can't answer that. It depends on how much work you do on the outside. If you put it on Jacques and Roxanne, we don't have much power. And so dealing with portable water and not changing the values of people are not going to make any social difference, real difference, unless they are skilled in the art of managing what exists in terms of earth resources. To intelligently manage the resources, to go much further and render more service to people. You cannot deal with it just improving the water or just agriculture or housing alone. That is not the problem. The problem is the operation of the whole of society.
Is it a possible option when the specialist comes to you and to be able to live and engage in research actively here in Venus? Perhaps we can already collect something like the scientific community.
The scientific community has to be made. It doesn't exist yet. The scientific community that is against nuclear weapons, what is their proposal for ending it? If you don't come up with a workable proposal for ending the development of nuclear weapons, you've done nothing. Try to think about what I'm saying. You cannot advocate decency and ethics. You must design the conditions that eliminate the problems. For example, in scarcity, people will tend to steal. If you make things available to people, they tend not to steal. You must understand what I'm saying. If you make a library available, things available like the public library, books, cameras, musical instruments, make all things available to people, they will not break into your house and steal. If you fail to do that, the problems will continue. I don't know why it's so difficult for people to make that connection. If you make things available, people do not steal.
This person was asking me if the scientists can come and stay and live here. We don't have facilities to have people come and live here. If we had funding, if people wanted to donate funds for land and building, this is what we'd love to do, a larger research center, and be able to have more people be in close contact and live and work together.
We cannot do that if you put it upon Jock and Roxanne. We don't have the funding to do that. We need your help. If you really believe in cooperation, then you help to bring these things about, not putting it upon us. Say, what if you purify water? We can't purify water. We don't have the equipment to do that. We don't even have the equipment to do research in that area. So if you really believe in something, support the project you believe in.
If we keep on living the way we are today, do you think that we'll have a World War III?
That I can't answer. It seems that we're moving in the wrong direction, yes. It seems that we're moving toward more wars than ever. And the universities, I said before, are better equipped than ever. But the bombs are getting worse. The airplanes are getting more destructive. The weapons of war are getting more accurate. So I don't see any real growth.
Yeah, there's so many wars going on all the time, and they used to bring us out of depressions, and they're not doing that anymore. They're just stripping us of any funding for social programs at all. It's just getting so much worse. And like Jacques said, the weapons we're making and that we're even trying out on Gaza, the atrocities that are going on there are just awful. It's possible to have a World War III. What they say, it's the war to end all wars. I don't know which war that one was. It's a long time ago.
There never has been a war to end wars. In other words, they're just words assembled in a certain way that people like to hear. But then none of those words deal with anything. The peace group doesn't know how to attain peace. By painting the lettering peace on the ship doesn't bring about peace. Or protesting a new battleship or aircraft carrier doesn't bring about peace. What you have to do is work out a system that takes care of human needs. If you fail to do that, you will have trouble. Territorial disputes, arguments, all kinds of conflict between nations, unless you work out a system. We feel that the Venus Project is such a system. You have to become familiar with it, and I would recommend those of you that can possibly do this is come out here to a Venus Project tour where you will learn in detail precisely how to accomplish the end goals of the Venus Project.
This question is about, do you think it's positive, the new creation of Banco de Sur in Argentina? I'm sorry, I don't know what that is. Do you know what that is, Sean?
No.
No. If somebody can give us information, we'll look it up. Have we reviewed Kickstart? Yeah, we may do something on that for funding, or have we invented something special to get good money for the needs of the project? I don't know if you're talking about a product or something. Jacques started with products a long time ago, and it doesn't mean that even if you have a good product, that you'll make good funding with it. He decided not to go that route, that pushing the ideas of the social direction are most important. So we're doing we're trying to put as much information as we can out there about the social direction. You can spend a lifetime doing products and it may not go anywhere. There's a deep attachment for people to their religion.
Just in regards to the tours, someone is asking when they start on Saturdays and how long they are.
We have a page on our website that says tours, but they start at 1 o'clock, they go to around 6 o'clock.
It's really not a tour.
It's a seminar, yeah.
It's a seminar on details, all the details necessary to build the Venus Project. It is not just a tour, it's a way of thinking. It's our values, how we get to be the way we are, how to change human behavior, how to invade groups that are opposed to this point of view, and the method for arriving at decisions, helping them to understand the direction of the Venus Project. It's the methodology of attaining a resource-based economy. It's almost absolutely necessary for some few people that represent various groups to be exposed to how the system works. And it's very difficult to get on the internet. It's very difficult to propose on the website. You have to come out here and see the drawings, the proposals, the hydroponic gardens, the design of the farms, so that you know precisely what to do. Just like if you have difficulty with that, imagine becoming a doctor on your own. You have to go to a medical environment or a university that teaches medicine. If you wish to become an aeronautical engineer, you have to go to a university that stresses aeronautical engineering. Mathematics, maybe MIT, or science, MIT. You have to go to that environment. I don't know why people think they can understand the Venus Project by reading a book or watching a tape. It takes a lot of indoctrination, and that's why I say it's extremely difficult for me to talk on the website and try to get you to understand the Venus Project. I have to disrupt your way of thinking, the way you're brought up, the dominant values that you have. The process with which you think about the future is based upon old social systems. The Venus Project offers a new way of thinking, and that's what the tours are about, a new way of thinking.
If you can't make the tours, we also have a lot of information in the audio tapes and the videotapes, the lectures. This is concerning religion. A lot of people are attached to religion. What's the Venus Project's approach? How should we present the Venus Project?
You present the Venus Project as a method of operating social systems so that everybody gains. There's no private gain in the operation of the social system. Everybody gains. You go to school free. There's no taxation. There's no burdens put upon people or debt. With that system, you can never overcome the problems.
It's really it's really a methodology and showing you how to arrive at the ideals that religion talks about. It's a heaven on earth instead of waiting until you die.
I think those of you that are religious, Jesus said, "Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." There's no money in heaven, no private property. There's a benefit for everyone. And what the Venus Project advocates is how to use the Earth's resources intelligently.
This person is saying that they think that there's some kind of compulsory education in the Venus Project. Does Jacques have a basic idea of what this education will entail? Will sociology, for example, be compulsory? What about history?
I understand. What you want to know is what will be taught in the future, how we relate to nature, how we are dependent upon nature. We're not separate from nature. We're part of it. How to relate to other people, how to enter areas of disagreement without getting angry. Those are the subjects taught. How to find meaning in your own life, how to communicate with other people that have a different set than you have. The subjects that will be taught are relevant to the necessities of life at that time.
This person is saying that they're active in the community for a better future, but however, many suffer from depression because of limited influence and political repression. Do you have suggestions to how to stay active, engaged, and happy or constructive while opposing the power systems that are in place today?
We have posted on the internet how to exceed, how to get out of depression, how to find meaning in your life. All those things are posted.
Yeah. On our YouTube channel.
On YouTube, yes. How to get rid of depression or lack of incentive, how to increase your incentive. All that is out there, posted for your use. A lot of you are not aware of that, so I'm just telling you about it.
Do you want to give any brief on that?
That's with Joel.
Well, it's just on the YouTube channel.
If you have any specific questions, please write us about the question, about what you feel you're having difficulty handling.
Do you want to go over anything briefly on depression or just refer to that? Yeah, there'll be more information
It's
there.
already done. It's out there.
There's a question here. Does any volunteer need any credentials to contribute to any project? By credentials, I mean degrees or certifications.
No, you need to understand the Venus Project. If you read the book, The Best That Money Can't Buy, if you read that book, you'll be more qualified to talk about the Venus Project. If you read the book twice, you'll be better qualified to talk about the Venus Project. But if you don't read the book, watch our tapes, read our literature, you are not qualified to talk about the Venus Project.
Okay, how does the Venus Project feel about articles portraying you and Peter Joseph as conspiracy dictator type mind washers behind global domination agenda? Okay, mastermind.
The difference between a dictatorship and the Venus Project is what you really want to know. Every scientific discipline is a dictatorship. In other words, they dictate the policy. You have to learn mathematics in order to design airplanes to carry a given load. If you carry 1,000 passengers airliner on an ocean liner, you have to know how much water 1,000 passengers use, how much food is necessary to make the voyage. So that's not really a dictatorship. It's based upon physical evidence. If you want to know if the Earth can support 7 billion people, you have to have enough arable land area to grow enough food to support 7 billion people. In other words, this is not a dictatorship. This is based upon scientific evidence to support a given project. If you want to put up a building, say a half a mile high, the material has to be available. Is that a dictatorship? If you want to call it that. But when you build a city for 1 million people and you don't take into account how much land you need to grow food or how much concrete you need to put up the necessary housing, you can't do the project. So every scientific endeavor is based upon the dictates of knowledge. In other words, you have to have sources of information to tell you what the range of behavior is. You cannot design a city for 7 million people if you don't have the water to supply that city. So if the dictates are based upon nature, I would not call it a dictatorship. The U.S. during World War II had 600 first-class fighting aircraft. The Germans were turning out 3,000 planes a month. We could not engage with them until we built up our aircraft production. Now that's what I mean by using statistics. Using statistics is not a dictatorship. It's a method of getting the most from existing resources.
And also, I think that it's a negative connotation, the way they're using dictatorship in terms of just to benefit a few at the loss of everybody else's well-being. And it's just the opposite. The Venus Project is for the well-being of everyone in the protection of the environment, bringing people to their highest potential with education, an education that is not abusive to one another, but everybody is working on things that'll be helpful to one another. When you take money out of the scenario too, you get rid of all the abusive, violent behaviors that people would have towards one another too, primarily. And a good education would help that. So it has nothing to do, it's almost a joke when I hear all that about the conspiracy and dictatorship, and it has nothing to, they know nothing about what the Venus Project is portraying when they come up with that. It's just a knee-jerk reaction to certain words that they've had.
Let me give you an example of that. Sometimes they say that, well, Fresco's resource-based economy sounds like a dictatorship. They say things like that. First of all, they don't understand the working mechanisms of the Venus Project. They say that, will the average person participate? Does the average person participate today? Think about it. When you build a space program, when you design a space program, the average person is not qualified today to participate. The average person doesn't design the aircraft carrier. The average person doesn't design highways. The average person does not participate in aircraft passenger design. They don't participate in transportation. They don't participate in anything unless they have qualifications. That's why you go to school. You go to school to learn how to become qualified to participate. If you have a problem in your house with the electric wiring, remember this. You call upon an electrician. When you have problems with the plumbing, you call upon plumbers. But you don't call upon the average person. They talk from the bottom up or from the top down. That's nonsense. There never has been any society operated from the bottom up, although that's an illusion they perpetuate. You have to have qualified electrical engineers designing the power transmission lines from the generating plants to your home. You have to have architects design the cities. You have to have transportation experts design the vehicles and the trains. It's never been from the bottom up. Those are nice words. They make people feel, gee, I'm really participating, but they really don't. If you still don't understand that, did you vote for the Vietnam War? Did you vote for the space program? Did you vote for the design of highways in America? Where do you participate? Oh, that's an illusion.
And if you don't participate, or if you don't have a job today, you can be kicked out of your house. You can end up in the streets. You don't get medical care in the United States anyway. In a resource-based economy, it doesn't make any difference if you don't participate. Hopefully you're encouraged to learn new things so you can participate, so you improve the lives of everyone. But you have access to everything anybody else has, whether they're participating or not. This person is reading Jeremy Rifkin's book on it, and he's asking, does the Venus Project believe in genetically modified foods or splicing and growing foods in a lab?
No, it does not. It believes in long-term research before we modify any food. You got to be very careful. No artificial flavoring, no artificial coloring, and no artificial way of growing things. If nature's been growing things for thousands of years, it's a proven system. By modifying food abruptly, you cannot tell what the future consequences may be of the modified food. So you have to be very careful. I'm not saying don't do that. I'm just saying much more careful research has to be done before you put anything out on the market.
Would there, in a resource-based economy, would there be any one central organ or one central place that would be the cybernated center? Or would it be like the internet all over different systems?
It'd be more like the internet, but not different systems. There'd be replicas of social management systems, electronically managed, but there'd be duplicates. If one fails, the next one takes over. If you have difficulty with that, today, if there's a power outage, did you know that the hospitals have an automatic system that switch on the lights and electricity, even if there's a power failure? So we have redundancy built into the system to try to make it as safe as technically possible.
What are your thoughts about cryonics and whether you see this as a possible route to the future?
Well, all I can say is that a tremendous amount of research will be done in cryonics. However, I don't think that any research will be done on it unless there's some degree of verification for the possible use of it. In other words, people that want to shove their relatives into the future have no chance of doing that. The future doesn't want all the relatives and people with an old value system put into the future. It's tough enough educating people to a newer value system rather than bring all your old relatives back into the future. I think that with the advent of the Venus Project, there's going to be a big stink in this cryonic center when they turn off the power.
How are moral ethics determined in the Venus Project?
No one determines ethics. If you make things available to people, they behave very well. If they do not have access to the necessities of life, they do not behave well. You don't need an ethical system. You need a system that doesn't require the need for ethics.
That includes warmth, love, and understanding, and a good education for children as well. Nobody's neglected emotionally or physically.
That's true. Of course, you're brought up to believe that people have free will and they make their own choices. The choices are always made within the culture that you live in. If you lived in the South and they said, are you a member of the Klan? And you say no, we're not buying anything from your stores. So what they do is they use social pressures to squeeze people into accepting certain patterns of behavior. That's the use of force. We do not use that kind of force. We educate people so they understand if you dump toxic materials into the ocean, you reduce the chances of your own survival by killing fish and marine life. You don't need to make laws. What you do is you learn how to take care of nature. You don't abuse nature. You don't cut down the forest. You don't pour toxins into the rivers and lakes because you've learned how we survive. And you learn how to maintain human survival. And you cannot do it by war, by nuclear weapons. You cannot solve problems by force. The nations of the future, if they survive, will not have armies, navies, marines, National Guard, police, or prisons. We'll do away with the need for those conditions. This is what the Venus Project is about. Doing away with the needs for aberration, the things that produce aberrant behavior in human beings. We now know enough about human behavior to know how to eliminate certain patterns of behavior. Therefore, those of you that are not familiar with it, get the Venus Project books and tapes, which will give you the information you need.
I think the last question we've already answered in terms of how to accelerate the collapse of the monetary system. So I guess that's it for today.
There are still a couple more, but I don't know how confident you are about your time. Do you want to take some more, or shall we actually delay them, postpone them till next week?
No, I want to take them on now.
How can we raise awareness about the Venus Project in a country where there's relatively little inequities like Norway?
I don't agree with that. I think there are many people that suffer
excuse me.
depression, emotional disturbances.
Inequalities, I'm sorry, I said inequities, but inequalities. Go ahead.
You don't solve the problem. You install a branch of the Venus Project. In other words, the Venus Project invites all nations to join, to participate in the reclamation of the environment and raising the standard of living for people all over the world.
How does the Venus Project deal with the nature of mass movements?
I don't know what that means. I don't know what you mean, sir. Will you reframe your question? I don't know. I don't understand your question.
Are there any supporters of the Venus Project within world governments? I don't know.
Not to my knowledge.
Yeah. What's Jacques' opinion about Michael Reynolds and everything he's doing? Refresh us on what he's doing.
No, not at all.
He's talking about the language.
Interlingua, Esperanto, none of those things deal with a language that's not subject to interpretation.
Excuse me, Roxanne, I guess we did not get the question because you dropped. So we just heard the answer without the referring question.
This language, Lojban language, I'm not sure how that's pronounced. Are you familiar with that?
No, but there cannot be a language yet within the price system that can be designed to be a method of communication, except mathematics, chemistry, physics, engineering, drawings. That's a language of positive communication. That's not subject to interpretation. It has to be based on those systems.
Will the test city be the new research center?
Yes.
This person saying throwing stones is not, okay, throwing stones is not the only way to sow the seeds of doubt and discord, the first stage of any mass movement. Spreading the word of a failing system does the same thing. So when the movement goes to the next stages of chaos, what does the Venus Project have in place to deal with the mass of discontent, disconnect, angry people?
I don't understand the question.
When you get a lot of people who are angry and disconnected, what's the Venus Project's next step?
We can't do anything about that.
Well, the same thing we're doing now is to educate people. If they're angry and they have no direction, they feel powerless. When they have no options, they get angry. So if they know what to advocate, and even as things fall apart more, even people with money and access to resources, there are people who will be able to initiate something at that time.
I say that if you don't inform people as to what to do, you leave them in midair. It is your job to inform people as to the benefits of the Venus Project's proposals, such as a resource-based economy, how it works. And if you can't get that across, then you have to try different methods of getting that across. It's your job to inform people as to the gains to be made by all nations by joining the Common Heritage Movement or the resource-based economy.
They have to know what to advocate.
Yes.
Otherwise, they'll just get the same dictatorship type of situation.
That's true, Roxanne.
How will medics work 24/7 if they're not paid?
They have access to food, clothing, shelter, and the necessities of life. That's all you want anyway. You really don't want a job. What you want is access to those things you would like to have.
What about medical urgencies?
What
You know,
about-
they're assuming that people don't do anything unless they're paid, unless there's some kind of money compensation. People,
They did a good job of
Yeah.
indoctrinating you to those myths.
there's so many people that volunteer today, even though they have money, or even if they don't have money. If they're poor, they volunteer as well. There are many doctors that, like Doctors Without Borders, Flight for Sight. These are doctors that go to different countries, even United States. They're setting up camps, that giving medical care, doctors that volunteer for free, taking time out of their paid working hours and volunteer to give free medical care. It's not the only reason people work, it's for money. People work more so when they do things that they believe in. They have much more feeling of fulfillment.
Yes, I would agree with that, Roxanne.
Can the Venus Project put a virtual tour together for the internet, like a correspondence course?
It's very hard because I can't see the people and I can't ask them further questions and I can't talk to them and say, did I answer your question? What aspect of the question that you asked do you feel was not answered? It's very hard on the internet to do that. But at the tours, we have people sitting there for hours discussing all aspects of the Venus Project. So far, the internet does not have that capability.
I know little about today's politics, though I know more about the Venus Project. Is it even worth learning about politics, or just continuing to educate myself on a resource-based economy?
Yes, just continue to study the workings of a resource-based economy, because that's what you need to learn how to make things work. If you study existing economies, you will learn nothing useful, except that it doesn't work.
Might be good to know what the problems are in politics, or how they don't work. Or can you explain why you said one time, Jacques, that there is no basis to war, so war is going to disappear, or might disappear?
No, I didn't put it that way exactly. I said war doesn't really solve problems. War is a force used, like we say, we go to another country, we go to war with them to bring democracy. We go to war to get oil or natural resources or cheap labor. We don't go to bring democracy. We don't want competition. In fact, all established industries would not like competition. If the Japanese automobile industry was flooded out by disaster, or the German automotive industry was flooded out, we would be happier in this country. Don't you see, the competitive edge means getting more money, more sales, and each country working for itself is detrimental to other countries. When you take out patents, you have to think about this. You deprive other people of using advantageous systems. So in the future, all ideas will belong to the world in general, but all inventors and all people will be given medical care and everything else. You have to take care of everybody, or the system doesn't work.
Have we considered using the South Pole Station as an example of a resource-based economy to introduce the concept? It's international, self-sufficient, and uses hydroponics and wind power, and all the people there are provided for in terms of food in return for contributions in research.
That would not serve the advantage of different people that grow foods. If you make food available without selling them, the food, the food that you send to countries that are deprived of food have to be paid for.
I think this person is asking, have you ever considered using the South Pole, which is a research center for scientists, as an example of a resource-based economy?
No, it's not. Nothing like that would work. In other words, if you sell building materials to a country that's been devastated by an earthquake, that's good. But if you give them the material free of charge, that's not good for a private enterprise. You see, private enterprise interferes with the well-being of all people due to the price tag. If you make things available to people without a price, you hurt the monetary system. That's why you can't have a decent and ethical social system, because there's a price tag on everything. Ambulances, hospital equipment, MRIs, X-ray machines. If all those things are made available without a price tag, then you have the system we're talking about.
I guess that's it for today. Again, we appreciate all your time and your questions.
Yes, Ben, thank you very much
Yeah, thanks,
for all
Ben.
your effort. I don't think I can always answer questions as other people mean it because they're not sure of exactly what the question is. They have difficulty, the average person does have difficulty putting the question or focusing in on the essence of the question. They talk around the subject in most instances. That's why I appear not to answer certain questions, because they don't seem to be adequate. They don't seem to be pinpoint. An example of good questions is who makes the decisions and how do they arrive at decision? What if three people come up with three different answers? Who selects what answer and what's the basis of selection? That's how you ask a question.
Right, so and in the future, I would like everyone to go through the material that is available from the Venus Project on our website, or listen to the recordings from previous questions and answers, so you get an idea of what has been asked already. And if you actually educate yourself, you will arrive at certain questions that you cannot answer yourself. And these are relevant questions to bring up during these seminars, because most of the questions, like I feel 90% about, are already covered by the materials we provide for free on our website or on the YouTube channel.
That's true to a large extent. Thanks, Ben. Thanks for all your help.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
Yes, Ben. Anytime you've got any real questions, trying to get them to pinpoint the question.
Right, so thank you everyone for being here today. Thank you, Jack and Roxanne, for giving us the opportunity to listen to you and all your answers.
Okay, and we'll see you next week too.
Right.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ben.